Alors, on va attendre encore un peu, mais je vais vous expliquer comment ça va se passer entre-temps. Donc, tout d'abord, il y aura une présentation faite par le docteur Gail Dines qui va durer à peu près 1 heure, qui sera sous-titrée en direct par Widad. Et donc ensuite, on aura une session de questions-réponses. Donc, vous pouvez poser vos questions dans le chat et on vous répondra, enfin, on les prendra au fur et à mesure et on y répondra à la fin. Et je vois que dans le chat, il y a une question, est-ce que ce sera disponible sur YouTube? Oui, ce sera disponible sur YouTube en replay. Si vous voulez envoyer à vos amis ou le revoir, ce sera dispo sur notre chaîne YouTube Osez le Féminisme. Alors, je pense que c'est bon, on va pouvoir démarrer. Donc, comme je vous le disais, moi je suis Ursula et donc je vais animer ce soir la présentation. Et donc, on est vraiment très heureuse et honorée d'accueillir le docteur Gail Dines ce soir, qui est une des plus grandes chercheuses en matière de pornocriminalité et de l'industrie pornographique au monde. Elle est professeure émérite de sociologie et d'études féministes à Boston. Et on est vraiment contente de l'accueillir ce soir. Hello, Dr. Gail Dines. You can start now and present yourself if you want.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. And hello, everybody. I wish my French was good enough to give this lecture in French, but believe me, you really don't want that. So I'm going to speak in English, and thank you for the translation. So I'm going to share my screen. And today, my talk is going to be about the feminist resistance against pornography. And the first thing we have to recognize that's going on is that as porn has become more mainstream feminism has become more pornified. So there's something really bizarre here that as porn is more mainstream, somehow what's happened in mainstream feminism is a move towards pro-porn, pro-sex work, which I'll be talking about later. So first of all, let's have a look what's happening in the world in our porn culture and how our porn culture is shaping males and females and basically reaffirming women as a subordinate sex class. Now, one of the problems when you're talking about pornography is that a lot of people do not know what is going on. They have an image of Playboy in their head from maybe 30 years ago. So what I'm going to do is really explain the new world that young people and women and men are now living in. So who really understands what's going on is the media. And this is an article from Details magazine, which is kind of cosmopolitan for men. And they had an article called How Internet Porn is Changing Teen Sex. And they interviewed Joanna Angel. Now, she's a pornographer and she's often referred to, quote, as a feminist pornographer. I just want to make clear there's no such thing as a feminist pornographer. You're either a feminist or you're a pornographer. You can't be both, because the first rule of feminism is do no harm to women. And as I'm going to argue again and again and again, pornography is violence against women in its production and consumption. So anyway, Joanna Angel, though, she did say something really interesting. She said the girls these days, they just seem to come to the set porn ready. Now, what is she saying here? She's not saying that all young girls, young women are going to end up on a porn set. What she's saying is that our culture is socializing them to think of themselves as disposable sex objects, which is a kind of grooming that's going on for young women all over the world today. So how do women and girls think about themselves as women? And to understand the socialization process, we need to think about what it means to grow up today in what is called an image-based culture, where the dominant form of communication is now the image. Now, for most people over the age of 35 and 40, we were brought up in what was called a print-based culture. Now, the famous media theorist, Neil Postman, said something very interesting. He said that in a print-based culture, we have some immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the printed word, to which I would add, we have no such immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the image. what that means is that images, even when they lie, they don't lie. There is a way in which images bypass the frontal lobes of our brain and land in a very different part. So as we go through this image-based culture, what do we notice? And this is true all over the world, is that the average image is of a young, thin, toned, bolted down flesh female, hypersexualized. This is from Cosmopolitan. Again, and often blonde. White is critical here because we have a racist beauty standard. And also the hypersexualized clothing. About 2 decades ago, this would have been clothing that was just shown in pornography. Today, it is pretty much mainstream. And so what you've seen is that pornography also has an impact on the fashion industry. And again, images of white, blonde women. Now, what's interesting is we do have some women of color who are mainstream, and I'm specifically talking about the US, but there's probably some truth about this all over Europe. So we do have some women of color, but they have to look like Beyonce or Cardi B. And what's interesting is when you see women of color, they're often either painted as animals or have animal skins on them, as in Rihanna. Now, this is an old trope that came down from slavery, that argued that Black women especially had a kind of animalistic sexuality. And what this stereotype did was legitimize the wholesale rape of African-American women on the plantation, because it put all the blame on her. And this continues today, where Black women are often seen as somehow not rapeable, because indeed it is their animalistic sexuality that causes them to be a willing victim. So I want to talk about how we understand images and how that impacts the way that young women develop a sense of themselves. So let's do some analysis on what we call visual grammar. So let's take a look at her and look at her clothing, look at her gaze, the way she's looking. And now there's a theory in media theory that says that every single image has a reader inscribed in the text. So who do you think she's speaking to? And before you answer, do you think she's speaking to a mother saying, let's go for a cup of coffee after the photo shoot? That's not who she's speaking to. She's speaking to men. And what she's saying very simply and very clearly is fuck me. And this is the fuck me look. And we see this everywhere. When you walk down the street, you are just overwhelmed with images of women saying, fuck me, fuck me. And of course, they're speaking to men. So when I was teaching my media theory classes, I would have my students, 3 women students come up, and I would say to them, do the fuck me look. And we wouldn't have to tell them what to do because they'd know exactly what to do. And then I would have 3 men students come up. And we'd say to them, do the fuck me look. And they would have no idea what to do. So we'd have to literally tell them what to do. Put your hands here, put your chest out. And they really would take a while to do it. And eventually we would have 3 women on one side doing the fuck me look and 3 men. And then what was so interesting was the men looked ridiculous. For the women, it was completely normalized. But for the men, it was ridiculous. And the question is, why was it ridiculous for the men? And the reason for that is that in patriarchy, what makes women hot is looking sexually vulnerable. What makes men hot is not fuck me, it's fuck you. It is basically sexual aggression. So let's just think what we've created in this gender system. We've created a situation whereby we socialize 50% of the population into thinking that being sexually hot is to be vulnerable. The other 50% thinking to be sexually aggressive is actually hot. And then what we've done is we throw in alcohol, throw in pornography, rape culture, and what you've done is you've laid the ground for rape, which is why feminists argue that men who rape are not deviants. They are, in fact, over-conformists to the messages of patriarchy. A man who rapes is not really in any way acting in a deviant fashion, given the messages he's got over and over again. And in fact, as a sociologist, my area of interest is actually the men who don't rape. What is it about these men who do not rape that has basically been a kind of wall against all the messages they get from patriarchy about the fact that women are disposable fuck objects? Why have they not picked up on those messages and followed them through? So often when we talk about this, that basically rape is not a deviant act in patriarchy, we often get called as feminist man-haters. Well, let's be very clear here. Feminists are men's best friends. We are the only group that believe that men are born fully equal to women. We are the only group that believe that men are born with the capacity for humanity, with the capacity for intimacy and connection. And you know what? If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't be doing this work. We'd go and find a cave somewhere to hide. So when they argue that we're man-haters, it's actually the pornographers and the porn culture that is the man-hating culture. And I want to say, I know that men are born equal to women. And I know that as a feminist, I know it as a sociologist, but more profoundly, I know it with every cell in my body as the mother of a son. No one can tell me that my son was born with less capacity for humanity than women. But from the moment he was born, this culture was out to train him into patriarchy. And me and his father spent our entire time protecting him against patriarchy. And the way we did that was we made radical feminism his first language. My son's first language is radical feminism in a way that it wasn't my first language. So this is possible and doable, but we need to do it on a macro scale. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying this is the job of mothers to do. Mothers have enough jobs to do in this culture, especially as there's no real support for women. So this is not about mother blaming. This is about blaming the patriarchy. Now, the question is, what happens to girls who are socialized in this hypersexualized culture? So the American Psychological Association did a report, and it was kind of a meta-analysis. They looked at all the research, and they said, what happens when girls grow up in this culture? And they came up with a concept called self-objectification, where girls learn to self-objectify. They learn to think of themselves as sex objects. And what they found is that the more a girl self-objectifies, the more likely she is to have anxiety, depression, body loathing, risky sexual behavior, more likely to be raped, more likely to self-harm, all of these things. So what we are doing to our girls is we are setting them up for an adulthood that is going to lead them into many of these side effects. So let me talk about what it's been like teaching feminist theory over 30 years. About, I would say 10 to 15 years ago, I began to see a change in my students. And I really couldn't figure out what was going on. And a lot of us who were radical feminists in women's studies were saying, so, you know, something's happened and we don't know what it is. And actually, who really taught me what's going on was not a feminist or a sociologist or a psychologist or a media theorist. It was actually a convicted child molester. So I ended up interviewing 8 men in prison, all of whom were in for downloading child pornography and raping a child. And all of them, by the way, had started as porn addicts. And I had like 3 hours with them, and they were really open about there was no reason for them to lie because they were all leaving prison soon. And this one, who had absolutely no remorse, he'd raped his 10-year-old stepdaughter, didn't have any remorse. He was showing off to me about how clever he is. And he kept using the word grooming, how he groomed his 10-year-old stepdaughter into getting ready for the rape. And grooming is a term that we use to explain how the perpetrator develops a relationship with his victim, hones in on his victim, buys her presents, tells her how beautiful she is. So he creates this kind of false connection. And then when she feels connected to him, he then rapes her. So he was explaining all of this. And then in the middle of this, he looked at me and he said something that changed the way I think forever. He said, the culture did a lot of the grooming for me. And I have to say, it was like fireworks went off in my head. And I thought, that's the missing piece. That is exactly it. The culture has become a perpetrator against our girls. Instead of having an individual groomer groom our girls individually, we now have a much more economical form of grooming. We have a mass culture grooming en masse our girls into thinking of themselves as disposable fuck objects. And this was the piece that I couldn't figure out what I was seeing in my students, because they were telling me stories about how they were hooking up with guys and how guys were treating them. And they were just absolutely looked like they were sort of conforming to patriarchal views. And then I realized they had been groomed by this. And I want to go back to Joanna Angel's statement that the girls these days, they come to the set porn ready. She's saying exactly the same thing. So we have a pornographer and a sex offender saying exactly the same thing. They're working from the same playbook, which makes sense because they're interchangeable, pornographers and sex offenders. So this is what we need to start thinking about. What are we doing to our girls in a pornographic patriarchal culture by grooming them into seeing themselves in this way? And what it comes down to is two choices for our girls today. You can either conform to porn culture or you're invisible. In other ways, you either have to look fuckable or you're invisible. And what choice are we giving young girls here? Fuckability versus invisibility. When you are 14, 15 and your friends are walking around in, the low-cut tops with the pierced belly button and the tattoo on the back, what are you going to do? Because in adolescence, there is a need to feel visible. If there's any hallmark of adolescence as a developmental stage, it is the need to see some visibility. We all need to be visible in the world, of course, but especially during adolescence. Now, in a porn culture, the only way to be visible is to be fuckable. So now we've not given our girls a choice, or young women. We've basically said, this is the only way for visibility. Now, when I go and give my lectures in high schools or colleges, I have a row of young women lining up crying. I also have young men crying on the other side, which I'll talk about in a minute. But, and these young women will come up to me and one will say, you know what? I chose fuckability and I hate it. I hate it because it's not who I am. It makes me feel horrible, but I don't want to be alone. And then the next young woman will say, you know what? I can't choose fuckability. It's not who I am, but I'm invisible and I hate it. And I feel so alone. This is terrible for our girls. When you hear the third wave, what I call faux feminism, talk about choices and agency, it is absolutely a ridiculous way to think about how women are brought up today and how girls are brought up. They don't have choices and agency when you're brought up in a porn culture. You force them into conformity. And when you force them into conformity, that is not a choice. That is being forced upon you. So let's talk now also about this same magazine, Details, and in the same story, how internet porn is changing teen sex. And they said something very interesting. They said here there's an entire generation of young people who think sex ends with a money shot to the face. So let's talk what that is. Now, a money shot is ejaculation on the face. I've watched more pornography than any human being should have to watch. Don't think I've ever seen a porn scene where men do not ejaculate on a woman's face. And in fact, what's really interesting is in studies, when men are interviewed, young men, and said, what sex act do you really want to do? They keep saying the whole time, I want to come on a girl's face. I want to come on a girl's face. And there's one particular study that's really interesting out of New York University, where it was a fantastic researcher and she did wonderful interviewing. So she interviewed these men and she says, well, why do you want to come on a girl's face? And the first thing they said was, well, it's fun, I want to see it. And she kept digging and digging. And then they said, well, you know what? It gives me a sense of power over her because I'm standing up and I'm coming on her face and she's down there. And then this researcher dug even deeper. And what she found is what they said was, actually, I really like coming on her face because I know she hates it. So what have we done today? We have socialized our boys and men into linking sex with the degradation of women and girls. This is, the two have melded now. Right? It's not that the borders have switched, it's that they've actually become one. The more you degrade her, the better the sex. So what's interesting is, what I want to tell a story from one of my classes. So a student said to me, we were in class, and a student was saying how she actually met a guy who was going to date her. And this was a big thing because hookup sex, you know, anonymous one night stands basically replaced dating on college campuses because the guys aren't interested in being with women other than for sex. So she found this guy and he really wanted to date her, but he said to her, I have one condition. You have to let me come on your face. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not letting you come on my face. And so he wouldn't date her. So I'm standing there like, what is going on here? And all my students are nodding. I see them all nodding. And I said, so this is normative behavior? And they said, absolutely. The guys come on our face all the time. They don't ask. Now, let me tell you, when I was growing up, if a guy would have said to me, I want to come on your face, I actually would have thought he was a psychopath. We'd never heard of such a thing. But of course, now that pornography is the major form of sex ed, this is the reality of the lives of these young women and older women. Now, in all of this, we have what's called a parental naivete gap, where parents are unaware, and it's not just parents, by the way, it's parents, it's experts who deal with children, pediatricians, therapists. They do not know what's going on. The studies show many of them underestimate how much porn their kids watch by a factor of 10. So let's get into what porn is today. So the gold standard study that's probably got the best research is by Anna Bridges and her team, and it was published in the journal Violence Against Women. And what they found is, of the 304 most watched scenes, 90% contained at least one aggressive act of violence against women. Now, Anna Bridges has just, and her team have just updated, this was 2010, and they're about to come out with their latest study, using exactly the same categories and looking at 304 of the most watched scenes. Today, in the latest study, that number is not 90%, it's 100. 100% of the most watched scenes have violence against women. And I have to say, I'm not surprised. I mean, as somebody who's watched a lot of pornography, I don't think I've ever seen pornography that doesn't have violence in them. And I want to say something interesting. There was a study published a few years ago that said that, that argued against this study and said that in their analysis, content analysis of Pornhub scenes, that only 3% had violence against women in them. So I got a call from the local, actual national radio program here in America to see if I would be interviewed about this study. And it was just out that day. So I said to them, you have to give me half an hour to read the study and see why they say 3%. So I read the study. And of course, the first thing you do is you look at the methodology and the categories. Well, you know how they define this other study? You know how they define violence against women in porn? It's if she said no. How ridiculous is that? These women are paid to say yes. The women I've interviewed said that if they say no to any of the sex acts, the pornographers coerce them into it or threaten them that they will never work again in pornography. So, of course, if you're just going to look at the word no, in fact, the word no barely exists in pornography. So this is a study that got massive publications all over the United States because it said that only 3% of scenes, and this was ridiculous. So what is the content of mainstream pornography? So I've been through this and I want to talk about what's in the mainstream. So if you go onto Pornhub these, and somebody needs to mute themselves because I can hear. Thank you. So if you go onto Pornhub, no matter what category you look at, big tits, MILF, teen, Asian, black porn, whatever you look at, you're going to get the same sex acts. And first sex act you're always going to see is gagging. And this is gagging with a penis, where the penis is so far down her throat, she can't breathe. And as she's trying to pull away from the man who's putting his penis down her throat, he drags her head and pulls it more towards her. And what you'll see, and you'll see some images, is they put a lot of mascara on her so that the tears that are coming down her face, you can see she's actually gagging. Second biggest act, which is actually getting up there with gagging now, is strangulation, which is hands around the throat. Now, what's the problem with strangulation, apart from the fact you could kill somebody? Well, another number of things. The first thing is, we know from studies that women who are strangled by their batterer during sex are more likely to die at the hands of the batterer. The second thing we know is that you can be strangled to the point where you pass out. And I've seen this many times in pornography. Her eyes start to roll back and she almost passes out. Now, you can wake up and think you're okay. The problem here is that it can take up to a week for the effects of strangulation to take hold. So you could go to bed one night thinking you're fine and down because your passages have swollen up.
No.
Another thing we see is rough anal sex, very, very pounding anal sex, to the point that often in pornography, women's anuses drop out of their body. Again, ejaculation on face, which we've talked about, hair pulling, spanking, spitting in a face. So the average porn scene on Pornhub is a woman being gagged, strangled, anally penetrated by one man, vaginally penetrated by another. Another guy obviously has got his penis in her mouth. She's having her hair pulled. She's being called a bitch, a whore, a cunt, you name it. And then they all ejaculate on her face. Now, the issue here is the level of ejaculation. She's sitting there and she cannot move. And as you watch this and you look at her, you think, how the hell is she going to get up off that floor? And how the hell is she going to go back to the set the next day and do the same thing again? I mean, I cannot imagine how these women survive the level of violence that happens to them on the porn set. So let me give you an example. This is a site called Gag on My Cock. And you see, we fuck them in the face till they cry. And they do cry. They cry all the time. You can see the mascara. Because these are not actresses. These are women often running away from sexual abuse, being pimped out, and they cry a lot. And they listen to this. So what they say is, do you know what we say to things like romance from foreplay? We say, fuck off. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. We make them gag till their makeup starts running and give them a sticky bath. So this is from a site called Gag Me and Then Fuck Me. Okay, so let's look at this for a moment, because we know one of the biggest single increases in the use of porn is by younger boys. So the average age of first viewing hardcore porn is 11. So here you have an 11-year-old boy who puts things like boobies, tits, or butts into Google and thinks if he's lucky, he's going to come up with he's going to see a pair of breasts, or he might see a naked woman. He is not prepared to be thrown into this violence of Pornhub. And look, so my question when I was writing PornLand, okay, and it got to the point when I was writing PornLand, I was like doing this. I could barely stand to look at the images. They were making me sick, as in I was having to do a content analysis of the work, and I just couldn't stand it. And by the way, I don't know if people know this, but PornLand has actually been translated into French, so it's accessible to you there. So anyway, I was writing this book and I was immersed in pornography and I couldn't stand it. And I was thinking to myself, what if my son, when he was 11, got into this? First of all, he would not be the man he is today. And secondly, I was thought, how could he stand it? Or how could any 11-year-old boy stand this? And this is when I started to really look at the text that goes with the images. And then it hit me what they're doing. Look at this. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. It's not true. Every man does not really want to do this. But that 11-year-old doesn't know that. He's got no repertoire of sexual history. He doesn't know that maybe his girlfriend, partner, whatever, is not interested in this. He believes this because he's got nothing to compare it to. So they're speaking to boys and saying, are you man enough for this? Because this is what every man likes to do. And if you don't want to do this, then you're not man enough. Another example, which is about anal sex, and this is the promotional copy for a film called Anally Ripped Whores, right? So the Anally Ripped Whores is out there. So they say, we at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. Chicks being ass fucked till their sphincters are pink, puffy, and totally blown out. Adult diapers just might be in store for these whores when their work is done. Okay, so they're very clear what they're doing to these women. Now, again, we at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. No, they don't. The 11-year-old boy is not looking for this. However, this is what he's getting. And again, they're saying to him, we know what you want, we know who you are, and this is, if you're going to be a real man, is what you want. So I want us for a moment to think about this 11-year-old boy who thought he was going to see a pair of breasts being catapulted into Pornhub with the violence. And let's for a minute sit with what's in his stomach. He has got a toxic stew of fear, anger, shame, self-loathing, and arousal. So think for a minute what that means. In fact, what I would argue is what Pornhub and the other major sites are doing is they are traumatizing our boys. Now, this is really problematic. Let's think about, because what happens is when you are traumatized, be it any form of act, if you do not resolve the trauma, then what you do is you habitually reenact the trauma. This is why many women who are raped often habitually go out looking for men, because the goal is to reenact it in the hope that you think it will have a different outcome. Of course, it doesn't. And what happens is you actually develop the trauma deeper into your neurons. So now this boy is traumatized. What's he going to do? He's going to go back to the site of his trauma, which is the porn sites. So he's going to keep going and going. So what they're doing in a very smart way by building trauma into their business model is they're actually developing addicts. Young boys are being turned into addicts via trauma. Now, when you do this to boys, not only do they pay the price, but who really pay the price also are girls, because we know that they act this out over and over again. And in fact, I have been working with a lot of child protection agencies, not just in the United States, but also in Europe. And I am hearing the same story over and over again, is what the child protection agencies, especially the frontline nurses in the trauma centers, are seeing is an increased level in child-on-child rape. Not only are they seeing more violence in those rapes that include strangulation and biting, the age of the perpetrator has gone down to between 8 and 11. So the rapist is between 8 and 11, which is ridiculous to call a boy of 8 and 11 a rapist, but that's what he's doing. And his victim is between the ages of 3 and 7. All right, so just sit with this a minute. And the women I work with, the nurses, are going nuts because they are seeing this and nobody will listen to them. The pediatricians aren't listening to them. Other groups aren't listening to them. And they are having to sit with this without any government or any pediatric organization anywhere coming out with recommendations for what needs to happen. How did we get here? So let's look at the industry. So no matter what methodology you use to look at this, at pornography, it is about a third of the internet, whether you're looking at traffic, whether you're looking at downloads, whether you're looking at bandwidth, it's a third. Porn sites get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. And interestingly, this is a pornographer. And he said a lot of people get distracted from the business model by the sex. Pornography, is just as sophisticated and multi-layered as any other marketplace. We operate like any other Fortune 500 company, to which I would add, they're probably more sophisticated, given that I have been following their business plan and the political economy of pornography. So porn businesses, like all businesses, raise capital, undergo mergers and acquisitions, have trade shows. Importantly, they have their own lobbying arm called the Free Speech Coalition, and they interface with banks, credit card companies, venture capitalists, cable operators, etc. Now that hardcore porn is mainstream and above ground, they are now woven into global capitalism. And when I often speak, people will say to me, you know, if you do anything against the porn industry, it'll go underground. To which my answer is that's exactly where it should be. Because when you bring it above ground, you've got every major international corporation with a vested interest in the continuation of the porn industry. This is the worst case scenario. And as they said in Adult Video News in 2009, the corporatization of porn isn't something that will happen or is happening. It's happened. What does this mean? It means that we now have one corporation that controls the vast majority of pornography that is distributed in the world. It is called MindGeek. It's located in Canada, Montreal. And I would say it's the equivalent of Amazon of the porn industry. And if you go on the MindGeek website, you will not see a word about pornography. All you will see is that they are search engine optimizers, leaders in IT. They have completely flown under the radar until last month, when the Canadian government started holding hearings. Now, MindGeek owns 10 of the 15 most popular porn sites. Most importantly, it owns Pornhub. Pornhub is one of the top 10 visited websites in the world. It's up there with Google, YouTube, and Facebook. So some statistics from Pornhub. It had 42 billion visits in 2019, which was up from 2018. Interestingly, they have not given the statistics for 2020 because the Canadian government is investigating them. So they've gone quiet on what the latest statistics are. This was a daily average of around 100 million visitors in 2019, 962 searches a second, and they uploaded in 1 year nearly 5 million new videos. You know how many videos are on Pornhub? You couldn't even see a millionth of them, and yet they keep adding and adding and adding. Now, Pornhub boasts that 100 million daily visits is if the combined population of Canada, Poland, Netherlands, and Australia visited Pornhub every day. You should know that in France, your men in France are in the top 5 of the countries with the most traffic to Pornhub. So France is just behind the US and UK. Now they want to talk about Pornhub traffic during the pandemic. So March, when we went into lockdown a year ago, we saw an increase of 120 million visitors a day to 134 million visitors a day to Pornhub. And you know why? Because literally the moment Europe went into lockdown, what was Pornhub's gift to the world? It made their premium content free. Now the premium content, now most of Pornhub is free, but there's premium content, that means more upmarket content, and they made it free to the world. This was their gift. So men now had access to higher quality, still the same level of violence, but even more porn. So now you had men locked down in homes with women and children using more porn than ever before. In Italy, visits increased to Pornhub 57% during the first month of the lockdown. In France, 38%. In Spain, 61%. So probably getting some idea of why violence against women and children increased during COVID and the lockdown. In the US, we saw a 40% increase at 3 a.m. And of course, 3 a.m. makes sense because the men are waiting for the women to go to bed, their families. Now, I just want to make this clear. This lockdown, this COVID has had more effect on women than on men. They are not only having to do paid work, they have had to do the majority of childcare, homeschooling. These women have lost a foothold in the economy. We've gone back 2 generations. So why women are going nuts, homeschooling, cooking, cleaning, looking after the kids. What are the men doing? Masturbating to pornography. This tells you something about the world we live in. Now, another thing that's been heavily affected is OnlyFans. Now, this is a web sex camming site. Now, seems to me the research I've been doing is that the camming sites are the future of pornography. Now, this is where women go on and they are content producers. So they often, and it's via a platform, OnlyFans. You don't actually meet the John, although it really is prostitution. You don't meet him, but he tells you what to do via the platform. So let me give you some facts. It was founded in 2016. The way that the women make money from producing their content is they produce the content for fans who give them tips. They also get money if they message their fans like, good morning, how are you, etc. It has 90 million users, okay? 90 million men following women on OnlyFans. Now, this is astounding. In last year, it had 120,000 content creators. That means women with sites on Pornhub accounts. It's now over 1 million. In 1 year, it went from 120,000 women to 1 million. And this is COVID. Women have lost their jobs. They can't make money. So they're moving to do sex camming on OnlyFans. And this is not going to go back once the COVID is over. The platform takes a 20% cut, which means it's a pimp, right? Pimping out the women. The women are subject to doxing, capping. Capping is when you take an image, when you're not allowed to, is you take a shot of the screen of the woman and you then upload it onto Pornhub or whatever, and you make money. They get death threats. And they have a referral program. So what does this mean? Women are not making much money on OnlyFans. You read about this woman making, $100,000 a month. Most of them make very little. So the referral program is a way for women to make money. If you've got a site on OnlyFans, if you bring your friends to OnlyFans, you get a percentage of her money. So it's a massive pyramid pimping scheme. Not only is OnlyFans pimping out the women, it's turning the women into pimps themselves. So this is a critical way in which sex camming is shifting the dynamics of the porn industry. Now, what do we know about the impact of porn on boys and men? We know from over 40 years of peer-reviewed research that the more men get to porn, the earlier they get to it, they have limited capacity for intimacy, more likely to use coercive tactics, including sexting, rape, harassment. The men are more likely to get involved in risky sexual behaviors, which of course women pay the price for. And they have, the men, increased anxiety, depression, habitual addictive use, and increasingly erectile dysfunction. So the future. Now, in 2003, Jules Jordan, who is a hardcore pornographer, he said something really interesting. He said that one of the things about today's porn and the extreme market is that so many of the fans want to see so much more extreme stuff. That was in 2003. So where have they gone for the more extreme stuff? Teen porn. That's what it's called on Pornhub. Teen porn or step porn, meaning stepbrother, stepsister. Sites like First Time with Daddy, It's Okay, She's My Stepdaughter. So let me explain what's going on now and why this is putting young women and children especially at risk. So if you go onto Pornhub, the top categories with the most films, most scenes is amateur at 300, well, nearly 305,000, big tits at 267, and teens at 262. Just by the way, amateur porn doesn't mean it's made by amateurs. Amateur porn is a subsection of the porn industry produced by pornographers to make it look like it's amateur. So it's made by the porn industry. Now, if you look at this, it looks like teens is the third largest category. So the men are out there looking for young looking girls. However, if you go into the back end of Pornhub and you look at the tags, now what this means is that you can find out what men who put teen porn in also put in. because they don't just look for teens. They put in things like small tits, solo female, they put in virgin pussy defloration, virgin, first time. If you add up the tags, then in fact, the biggest single largest category on Pornhub is young looking girls, nearly over 500,000. 500,000 videos up there, which shows young looking girls. Is it any surprise that we are now having studies that and I'm going to read this slowly, clinical experience and research evidence are now accumulating to suggest that the internet is not simply drawing attention to those with existing pedophilic interests, but is contributing to the crystallization of those interests in people, and that I'm quoting here, but they should say men, not people, with no explicit sexual interest in children. What they're saying here is non-pedophile men, because of their use of pornography of adult women, are getting bored and increasingly going to child porn. You remember those 8 men I talked about in the prison, all of whom were in for downloading child porn and raping a child? Not one of them was a pedophile. All of them were porn addicts. And when I said to them, are you pedophiles? They were really insulted. They said, no, of course we're not. So I said, then why did you rape a child? And you know what they said? We got bored, wanted something else. So they started with child porn, and it took between 6 months and a year to the raping a child. So this is the reality of what is going on now, that women and girls are at increased risk of these men. So now the question is, as everything's getting worse, we have to ask, how did we move from the feminist analysis that porn equals violence against women to the argument that porn equals women's empowerment, the third wave feminism? So let me just remind you what feminism, radical feminism, looks like. And I'm going to quote from a book by Barbara Smith, This Grudge Called My Back, which was a very important book in the US because it was the first book where it was women of color who were the editors and writers. So they say feminism is the political theory and practice to free all women, women of color, working class women, poor women, physically challenged women, as well as white, economically privileged heterosexual women. Anything less than this is not feminism. Notice it is the theory and practice to free all women. Notice nowhere do you see empowerment, because empowerment is about basically freeing the more privileged women. Empowerment is an individualistic concept. Liberation is a collective radical feminist concept. Now, the core of radical feminism is that women exist as a class, a subordinate sex class under patriarchy. And as Andrea Dworkin put it, the fate of every individual woman, no matter what her politics, character, values, is tied to the fate of all women, whether she likes it or not. When I joined radical feminism many years ago, I joined a feminism that said, this is not about me. I am a white, privileged, educated woman, right? But my privilege means shit for the women who, when I was finished teaching my university courses, would come in and clean the classrooms. And if she over there, my sister, is not free, then it is my job as a radical feminist to walk mountains, to cross whatever I have to cross, to build a movement that frees all women, not just individual women. So, as Andrea Dworkin said, think about pornography as social control, a democratic use of terrorism against all women, a way of saying to every woman, when you look up, bitch, you're going to see your legs spread. This is a form of sexual terrorism. It is sexual terrorism against the women in pornography and against all women as a way of telling us who we are. And we had fantastic books. We had Andrea Dworkin's book, we had Pornography in Silence by Susan Griffith, we had Not for Sale by Rebecca Wisner and Kristin Stark, Take Back the Night. We had great books all arguing that feminists, that pornography was violence against women and laying out the theory and practice. And then feminism went down a rabbit hole of insanity. And all of a sudden we started getting these books, bound and gagged, hardcore, and defending pornography, all written by women, all of whom call themselves feminists, all of them defending pornography and saying in some cases how great it is for women because it's empowering. And then we went really mad a few years ago with a publication of a book called The Feminist Porn Book. I never thought I would live to see those three words put in one place together. Feminist, how is this possible? I mean, it's enough to make your head spin. It's so crazy. And let me read you a review from Amazon of this book. The Feminist Porn Book identifies the importance of pornography as a form of expression and labor in which women and other minorities produce power and pleasure. You know what? I think I'm pretty smart, but I don't know what the fuck this means. I have no understanding. What does it mean? As a form of expression and labor in which women produce power? Who do they produce power and pleasure for? Right? This makes no sense whatsoever. And yet we have this crazy mixture of words put together saying that somehow women are really doing well out of porn. When my book came out, PornLand, it got a very, very negative review in Ms. magazine, which is a so-called feminist magazine. Now, I had been interviewed by Shira Tarrant, who is she's a political science professor in California. And there was 4 interviews of me and reviews of the book in Ms. And every single one was negative. So in one place, she's criticizing me for saying that women in pornography are raped and basically it's a form of violence against women. She goes and interviews a pornographer by the name of a woman performer by the name of April Flores. And she says, April Flores, there is no doubt that porn is a very physical job. However, it's also a very individualized profession. A performer always has the choice of not doing something they're not comfortable with. So I give a radical feminist structural analysis of pornography as violence against women. And to argue against my structural analysis, Shira Tarrant, a privileged white woman who is a professor, goes and interviews a woman of color who works in the porn industry to say this. Now, you know what? April Flores is in the porn industry. This is how she probably feeds herself, her kids. Of course she's going to say this. What else can she say? And this is used. One woman, and I don't even know if this is her experience, because I would like to speak to April Flores once she leaves the porn industry, because that's when you hear what it really feels like for these women. So what happens is a structural view of pornography affecting all women is replaced by an individualistic neoliberal view of women expressing themselves. This is what has happened in the view of pornography. And this move is part of a much larger shift away from radical feminism to neoliberal feminism that took hold during the Reagan-Thatcher years. So you want to blame somebody, start blaming these two. Now, Margaret Thatcher said there is no such thing as society, only individual women, men and women, which of course is ridiculous. But then one of the founders of the third wave, sounding like Margaret Thatcher, said feminism is something individual to each feminist. Now, have you ever seen a movement that's individual to each member of the movement? What would happen if the civil rights movement was individual to each person of color? You'd have no movement. What would happen if the labor movement was an individual to each person, each worker? You can't build movements on individual thinking. A movement, by definition, has to have a collective agreement on what the goals, the aims, and the solutions are to the problem. So this is neoliberalism at its worst, which is the founding statement of third wave feminism. In neoliberalism, there is no such thing as structural inequality, systems of oppression, or groups with collective interests. Instead, in neoliberal feminism, we're just lots of individuals making lots of individual choices with lots of self-empowerment, which of course is ridiculous. And it gets really bad when they've renamed prostitution to sex work. Now, this is from the Open Society. Sex work is a consensual transaction between adults, where the act of selling or buying sexual service is not a violation of human rights. Notice they don't mention women and men anywhere. Who's buying what from who? Women are not buying sex from men, right? Men are buying sex from women, and sex work is developed, a term developed by the sex industry to legitimize the Johns and the pimps. That is the role of the term sex work, because we should be using prostitution and prostituted women. Now, sex work versus prostituted women. Sex work renders invisible the exploitation of work by decontextualizing it from the economic, political, and legal systems of oppression that make women a subordinate sex class. Prostituted women is the buying of sex, and it requires a structural analysis. And when you look at the structures of prostitution, what do we need? We need an economic system that commodifies humans. That's called capitalism. We need patriarchy that makes women and children the obvious groups to commodify, and racism that makes women of color the most likely group to women to commodify. Without racism, sexism, and capitalism, we simply would not have a system of prostituted women. But what else do we need for prostitution to work? What's always missing from the third wave analysis of, quote, sex work? Men. You remember them? No one talks about them in third wave. Well, I just think I should remind you what men look like. These are guys who were recently caught buying sex in Arizona. So porn and prostitution are not considered violence against women because women consent. This is the argument we hear over and over and over again. Consent, consent, consent. So what is consent in a patriarchal system? Let's take that apart. We know that women consent under conditions of opportunity and constraint. So first of all, consent is an empirical concept. We have to look which women consent to what. And we know that the constraints on women in patriarchy are poverty, racism, histories of sexual abuse, especially in the sex industry, histories of substance abuse. And if you're not got substance abuse when you go into the sex industry, you're certainly going to develop it afterwards because you need to deal with all the trauma, being pimped out, and the grooming of women and girls in patriarchy into consenting. So the reality is this fetishization of consent, consent, consent is meaningless. When you have all of these things, poverty, racism, sexual abuse, substance abuse, pimping, and grooming women to be porn ready, as Joanna Angel said, then what does it mean to say yes? Because you can't say no, because you've been socialized into it. So how do we change our toxic culture? We have to. And we have to change it every which way. The Gulliver strategy method, we tie patriarchy down any way we can. At Culture Reframed, we've taken a public health approach to pornography, and we have developed programs for parents so that they can teach their kids to be resilient and resistant to pornography. And our vision is a world based on equality and empathy, free from the harms of hypersexualized media and porn culture. So anyone's interested, go to culturereframed.org. Now, what do we need? We need governmental legislation that defines pornography as non-state torture. We need to hold porn sites accountable for the violence done to women and children in production and consumption. Withdraw all credit card payment systems from porn websites. End to corporate social responsibility approach of self-regulation by the porn sites. We need proper government regulation, enforce age verification, like I think you've got that in France, and reconceptualize consent. As long as we have this consent, consent, consent argument, we're not going to change. Now, what does informed consent look like? So when women are going into the porn industry, they just sign a form. But in fact, this is what it looks like when they go in. This is what it means when you're going in. And this is not what they're told, that you lose control of the most intimate images of your body, limited to no recourse to having your images removed. Your body is exposed to millions of porn users who will view you as a slut or a whore or worse. You're attacked on social media by the porn industry and porn users if you criticize or sue the porn industry, and you live in fear that your loved ones, including your children, will see these images. We know when we look, this is from AIM, which used to do voluntary testing of women for sexually transmitted diseases. Women in porn have herpes of the eye, chlamydia and gonorrhea of the eye, gonorrhea of the throat, gonorrhea of the anus. What other job description gives you this? This is not a job. This is not sex work. This is violence against women. We have to shift the narrative. Now, we call child pornography child sexual abuse images. Why? Because we know children can't consent to porn. It is a documentation of child sexual abuse. The image is a crime scene, and children are harmed on multiple levels by production. And all children are at risk by production and consumption. So instead of saying child pornography, we're increasingly saying child sexual abuse images. I would argue that we need to rename pornography to women sexual abuse images, so it captures the reality of porn as the documentation, distribution, and consumption of violence against women. So we have a pie. What do we want? Do we want the whole pie as feminists? Do we want half the pie? Do we want the crumbs? No, we want to deconstruct the pie, get rid of it. It poisons everybody. And in fact, we need to build a new pie because we do not want the pie of patriarchy. So how do we get to where we want? We conscious raise to make radical feminism mainstream feminism. We organize, organize, and organize. We speak truth to power. We refuse to collaborate with patriarchy. And we misbehave in the most of unladylike ways. Because, as the quote said, well-behaved women seldom make history or herstory. And we owe this to our foremothers. We owe it to all those women who went before us so that we could take all of their knowledge and activism and build a movement. We owe it to our sisters and our daughters. And you know what? We owe it to our sons. We really do, because they're not doing well in this porn culture. And we have to remember that women are at the forefront of every movement that matters. They're at the forefront of the labor movement, forefront of the civil rights movement, forefront of the climate change movement, all the major movements. We need to be out there fighting as sisters to get rid of the porn industry, the entire sex industry, and patriarchy as a whole, because we simply cannot live in this system. We just cannot live in this system. Patriarchy is poisonous to women, to children, to the planet, to everything. And it's about time we took all that rage that we feel as women. We take that rage and we make sure it's on a slow boil so it doesn't destroy us. And we take it, we organize, and we fight to change the system, because we say we refuse to collaborate with your toxic, hateful system that is destroying women, children, and the world. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions now.
Thank you very much, Gail. It was very interesting, and we have a lot of questions for you. So I'm just gonna start talking about your book for a minute. Donc, le livre de Gail Dines a été traduit en français il y a peu de temps, donc il s'appelle PornLand, comment le porno a envahi nos vies. Je viens de mettre le lien dans le chat. Vous pouvez le commander directement sur le site de l'éditeur qui s'appelle Édition Libre. Et c'est un livre qui est une enquête vraiment sur les réalités du système pornocriminel dans le monde et surtout les conséquences du système pornocriminel sur la vie de toutes les filles, les femmes et la vie de tout le monde en général. Donc je vous conseille très fortement, on vous conseille Osez le Féminisme très fortement la lecture du livre de Gail Dines, et c'est une lecture difficile mais nécessaire vraiment pour se rendre compte du système dans lequel on est actuellement et qui ne fait que s'empirer d'année en année, comme l'a démontré à l'instant Gail Dines. Alors, on va prendre les questions, il y en a beaucoup, donc on va voir si on réussit à tout faire. Avant ça, je voudrais aussi vous dire que pour qu'on puisse continuer à pouvoir faire ce type d'événement, on a besoin de vous. Donc, vous pouvez soutenir l'association en adhérant à l'association ou alors en faisant des dons. Je vous mets également les liens dans les chats pour adhérer et pour faire des dons. Si vous pouvez nous aider, c'est avec grand plaisir parce qu'on est toutes bénévoles et donc on peut faire ce type d'événement grâce au soutien des adhérentes et des adhérents et aux dons. Et continuer donc le combat comme nous l'a si bien dit Gail Dines en conclusion. Alors, on va commencer avec les questions. Je vais d'abord les faire en français et ensuite je les poserai en anglais à Gail Dines qui répondra et vous aurez la traduction en sous-titres comme tout à l'heure. Alors, comment analysez-vous le fait que l'industrie pornographique ait été remise en question dernièrement avec, on l'a vu, l'affaire notamment PornHub, et est-ce que ça pourrait être le patriarcat qui fait semblant de s'intéresser au porno, qui essaye en fait de nous enfumer? Alors, je vais poser la question à Gail Dines. I'm going to start with the first question for you, Gail.
Okay.
So, how do you analyze the fact that porn industry was questioned lately? Is a porn article in the New York Times that you talked about? Could it be patriarchy pretending to care about porn?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Tell me again. Apologies.
Yes. So, how do you analyze the fact that porn industry was questioned lately? That is
Oh,
being,
was questioned in Montreal.
yeah. And could it be patriarchy pretending that they care about porn?
Okay, so actually, I do know the people, the MPs, the members of Parliament in Canada who've been doing this. And no, there's a good group of them who really are concerned about this. And actually, it ended up being questioned because a lot of feminist groups in Canada forced this. So I think it's real. The real issue is what happens after the hearings. And this is what my fear is that what happens after the hearings is that it all just falls apart. So I want to suggest something on here. And I'm thinking of doing something, and I could do with some help, is that and I don't know if there's anybody here in France who, and it would probably have to be in English, that we write a letter from feminist groups all over the world. And we address it to the Canadian government. And we say, how dare you, the Canadian government, have allowed porn MindGeek to continue to do this level of violence against women and children? And to say that what you do in Canada has had terrible implications all over the world. And we are watching you, and we demand that you regulate Pornhub and MindGeek out of existence. So I'm seriously thinking, if I had the time and if somebody wants to help and start putting together a letter, and then we get up a Facebook page and we just get non-profits from all over the world signing on, and we say to Canada, we are watching you, because these are not Canadian hearings. What you do in Canada has devastated the world by allowing MindGeek to continue. So because I'm really worried that they're just going to do nothing in Canada against MindGeek. I can't hear.
Sorry, I forgot to reactivate. Donc, on a une seconde question. Est-ce que vous pensez que l'opinion publique a changé à propos du porno? Et comment pouvons-nous avoir un impact sur les médias et l'opinion publique? So, the question is, do you think public opinion has shifted about porn lately? And how can we have an impact on the media and on the public opinion?
Okay, yeah. Now, I've been doing this for 30 odd years. So I got this vision of 30 odd years. It has definitely shifted. This last 2 years, and even the last year, I have seen a change in the way people are talking about pornography, the way media is addressing it. I mean, it used to be literally and I've done thousands of interviews, and it used to be, it was always about Gail Dines, a right-wing conservative Christian who's a book burner. And of course, actually, I'm a radical feminist Jew, so they got all of it wrong, everything, right? So, but now they don't do that anymore. It's astounding. I have had interviews with, I was convinced the journalist was going to be against me and was with me. So something is changing in the air. And just to give you an example, my group, Culture Reframed, which is really the only science-based anti-porn group in the United States, we have gone from being a small nonprofit, and we're still small money-wise, but to being global. We are working in Turkey. We trained 200 therapists in Turkey on the culture reframe programs. And for the first time ever in Turkey, you've got therapists lecturing about pornography. I addressed the Colombian government on pornography and violence against women, and the Colombian government are looking to do things. We're working in Brazil, Italy, Norway, Sweden, the UK. We've gone international. So yes, something has changed. Now is the time absolutely to jump on this. And that's why I think this letter to MindGeek as well is so crucial. And again, if anyone is out there who speaks English and wants to start this up, you can just put in Gail Dines into Google, my name, and my website comes up immediately, and get to me through my website. And I would love for people to do that. I can't do it because I run a nonprofit and life is impossible and I've just got too much on, but I will help. And I've got a huge Facebook following, so I can advertise it all over my Facebook page. But I think we should set up a Facebook site and come up with a letter and get up there to the Canadian government. We've got to strike now.
Thank you, Gail. Alors, on a donc une autre question. Est-ce que les producteurs de porno ciblent plus spécifiquement les enfants, et si oui, comment? So the question is, do porn producers target children specifically, and if so, how?
Okay, so this is a complicated question. First thing, what do we know? We know that the majority of children who are used in child porn are sold into it by their parents, usually their father. So that's the dark web, illegal child porn. Now, on Pornhub, they are using young-looking women. And my assumption is a lot of them are not 18. And there is no real law that is being enacted which says that you have to verify the age of the kids on the porn set. So yes, the porn industry knows full well that adult men are bored with adult women and are looking for something new. So yes, I would say this is purposely done. And actually, when I've interviewed some women who've left the porn industry, they said often they were told by their pimps who sold them to the porn industry, and actually the pornographers, that they had to get braces put on their teeth so they look younger. So yes.
Thank you. So next question. Comment avez-vous pu faire en sorte de regarder autant de pornographie pour faire votre livre, et comment avez-vous pu l'encaisser? So in English, how did you cope with the porn content you had to watch to write your book?
It's a very good question. You develop a thick skin to all of this. You have to. You absolutely have to. Are there times when it overwhelms me and I'm sitting in my office weeping? Yes, of course. I have an excellent group of friends who are also anti-porn activists, and we have this message, this email, that when one of us is suffering and needs help, we put in the subject line, "I'm in porn hell." And we know then that we all need support and to talk to each other. And also I have to say, and I have to be honest here, I am very, very fortunate that I ended up marrying the most pro-feminist man I've ever met in my life, who is the least creepy guy I've ever met, and has been a major support in my life. And he's actually also, we work together. He's an economist, an economics professor, and we write and work together about the porn industry. And we've both been expert witnesses. And this was not his area of research, believe me, and he was not seen porn. That was the interesting thing. He'd not seen porn. And although his specific area of research is the climate crisis, he's also interested in the industry, the porn industry. So we've done a lot of work together. And I was just fortunate that I met him at 18. And I always said to my students, there's two types of men. There's those who you can turn into pro-feminist men, and there's those you can't. If you find one you think you can socialize into being pro-feminist, then it requires you stay and work with them. That's if you're heterosexual, of course, because, heterosexual women have a really difficult time when they're radical feminists. It's not like these men are dropping from the trees. right? You know, most times it's almost difficult. So I have to say that. And I have a wonderful family. That's what keeps me sane. And all of you lot out there, looking at all these wonderful young faces of all these wonderful women and doing this work. Doing this work is what keeps me sane, because I cannot unsee what I've seen. So the only way that I stay sane is doing this, is raising consciousness.
Thank you. Donc la prochaine question, c'est comment votre travail est-il reçu dans le monde universitaire et intellectuel aux États-Unis? So how is your work perceived in the academic and intellectual world in the US?
Well, I don't think I'm going to win any popularity prizes in women's studies. It's very well respected when it comes to those working on these issues on the front line, like child protection agencies, pediatricians. In the actual women's studies departments, I'm sure they teach PornLand, but not in a positive way. But, you know, I don't care. I do care. I should say the only thing I care about is that they are training the next generation of intellectuals to be pro-porn. And this is what I can't stand. This is so bad. But it's not well received, obviously, by academics. They don't like it, you know, because I argue, you know, and I won't back down. I won't back down. And I don't sugarcoat anything. See, academics, if you're an academic and you can say something in 10 words, but you could really say it in 1,000, you say it in 1,000 words, right? You don't get straight to the point. I'm clear, I'm to the point, and I don't mess around. And that's not liked in academia either. And as I say, I've got no time for this third wave neoliberal feminism. As far as I'm concerned, it's done a terrible disservice to women and children all over the world.
Alors, ensuite, on a une question. Quel est où en est-on de la régulation sur la pornographie dans les différents pays et comment l'industrie est-elle régulée? So, what's the status of public regulations in different countries about porn, and how regulated is the porn industry? Is the porn industry regulated at all in different countries?
Well, it's banned in certain countries, and those are not countries we want to live in, right? Because they're banning all political speech as well. What we need is, I wouldn't say ban porn, I'd say we need to regulate the industry out of existence. That's what we need to do today. Is there any country that's seriously looking at regulation? Well, Colombia is, and that's where I was working with the government. I was amazed. Who would think Colombia would be a bold country to go out and do something against the porn industry? No, but other than that, no. And you know what? It's up to us, the feminists. If we don't do it, they won't do it. So we cannot leave the government to do this. And when they do it, like in Canada, it's not enough they do it. We have to insist they enforce it as law. So no, there's nowhere that's doing this. But we need to, that doesn't mean to say we don't change it. Look, women have changed the world so many times. This is what we do. Men make a mess and we clean up. We're great at cleaning up men's mess. So this is one other mess we're really going to have to clean up. You know, I'm sick of cleaning up men's messes. I wish they'd stop making messes. But at this moment, it doesn't look like there's any chance they're going to stop making a mess of the world.
Yeah, I agree. Est-ce que vous travaillez avec des psychotraumatologues à propos des pornocriminels et de leur stratégie de dressage? Do you work with psychotraumatologists about pornocriminal and pedocriminal grooming strategy?
With psychologists who's trauma experts?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yes, all the time. Yes, I work with actually we partner with an organization that is the main organization for training therapists in trauma here. I've got a lot of the, although I'm not a trauma specialist myself, I've done a lot of research on trauma, because you can't not do that working in this field and understanding the trauma of the women in the industry. I think there's not enough trauma experts who have applied their knowledge to pornography. And this is what we're trying to do, is get those trauma experts who are true experts on this subject to really understand it. And I think, you know what, in another way, I think we need to think about the fact that pornography is in and of itself a form of trauma to all women.
Yeah.
To know that that exists and that we live in an unsafe world and that we could be raped at any time in our lives is a massive form of collective trauma.
Yeah, I agree. It works like a threat basically.
It's terrorism. Women are held in a state of sexual terrorism. That's what men do to us, you know, and the fears and the terror of seeing it is just and experiencing it. And myself as well, you know, I mean, I travel a lot giving talks, and, you know, this big professor travels all over the world. The truth is, I'm no different to any other woman. I have to check who gets in the elevator. I have to check the back of the car. You know, if I go out at night, I have to be careful. You know, it doesn't matter. All women have bullseyes on their back. Now, the poorer you are, the more of color you are, the more you're in the sex industry, the bigger the bullseye. But we all walk around with a target on our back.
Yeah. Alors, que pensez-vous de Erika Lust et ce type de contenu? Est-ce féministe ou pas et pourquoi? So, you mentioned this, but can you elaborate on what you think about so-called feminist porn, and what do you think, for example, about Erika Lust, if you know her? Yeah.
I'm so sick of Erika. Oh my God. So, there is no such thing as feminist porn. You cannot have that, because pornography is about the degradation and dehumanization of women. There is no way you can link feminism with that. Erika Lust, and I've just been in, I'm in 2 documentaries about Erika Lust. I'm so sick of Erika Lust, and I've actually written an article about Erika Lust that I can send to you, and you could translate into French if you want, about how she is a traitor to all women. How, well, Erika Lust, I'll give her one thing, she is a very, very smart businesswoman. She has developed this so-called niche market called feminist porn, and I cannot tell you how many interviews I have about Erika Lust. But as far as I'm concerned, and I know from the research we've done, she is part of the porn industry. She uses the same webmasters, the same payment systems, the narrative of the films she produces are exactly the same, and she's pimping women out. She lives on the money that she gets from sexually exploiting women. That's a pimp. So that's what I think about Erika Lust, and I cannot tolerate the ethical porn or feminist porn. It is a ridiculous concept, both of them.
Si vous voulez en savoir plus sur la question, on avait fait une campagne sur la pornographie au mois de novembre sur notre Instagram. Et on avait abordé notamment cette question du soi-disant porno féministe, dans laquelle on donne plusieurs arguments. Le premier étant que quand on tape porno féministe dans Google, le premier site qui sort, c'est Pornhub. Donc je pense que quand on a montré ça, on a un peu tout dit. Donc la question suivante, quel lien faites-vous entre votre travail et celui de Andrea Dworkin ou de Catherine McKinnon? So, what links do you make between your work and the work of Andrea Dworkin or Catherine McKinnon?
No difference. I owe everything I know to Andrea Dworkin. I mean, that's the first, when I was 18 and I was sitting in a cafe in London and I read some Dworkin, it was like my mind just, like never the same again. Nobody wrote like Andrea. Nobody ever will. Also Catherine McKinnon's scholarship, which has been wonderful. I mean, it's thanks to them. You know, I wrote, when Andrea Dworkin died, I wrote the obituary for the Boston Globe newspaper. And I said at the end, if it wasn't for Andrea, who I knew when she was alive, I said I would still be looking at pornography thinking, you know, there's something I don't like, but I can't figure out what it is. It was Andrea who laid the groundwork. It was Andrea. So I just see myself as hopefully worthy of standing on her shoulders.
Ensuite, est-ce qu'il existe des liens entre l'excitation traumatique et la consommation de porno par les femmes? Is there links between excitement by trauma and consumption of pornography by women?
Is there a link? What was the first thing? I'm sorry.
Between being excited by trauma,
being traumatized.
But being excited. But when you think about your trauma, you know what I mean? Like excitement by
you're
trauma.
Really excited. You're triggered.
Triggered. Exactly.
Yeah.
In between that and the consumption of porn by women.
And the consumption. Oh, absolutely. I've had students who tell me, who've been looking at, and remember, women are a minority who look at porn. We know that from the studies. But there are some women who look at hardcore porn and masturbate to it. And my students, I've had students who told me, who've had horrible histories of sexual abuse, that they watch hardcore porn because they cannot get an orgasm without watching another woman brutalized. So that's my anecdotal experience. We have not got enough research yet on, there's virtually no research on women who consume porn. There's the first study out I saw last year, and what they found is that women who consume porn tend to have more histories of trauma and have the same effect. It affects them in very similar ways to it affects the men.
Thank you. Alors, la prochaine question est un peu longue, j'essaie de la traduire. Que pensez-vous, comment faire un impact fort public malgré la culture porno? Est-ce qu'on peut toujours se mettre nu? Est-ce que c'est une méthode acceptable et qu'on arrive à détourner l'hypersexualisation en montrant, par exemple, nos seins sur des questions féministes? So, what is your take on what is an effective way of making impact publicly despite the pornified culture we are in? Is nudity interesting as a method? Is it possible to bypass the over-sexualization and reach our aims by exposing our breasts nowadays to raise awareness on women issues?
No, first of all, this whole idea of exposing our bodies as a way to undo the hypersexualization of this culture does not make any sense. What we're doing is we're then self-sexualizing. You know, there's this, I don't know what you call it in France, it's called Free the Nipple campaign. Have you got that in France? Okay,
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm often asked when I think about this, why is it free the nipple? Why haven't we got a free the testicle? Why aren't men freeing their testicles? That's what I want to know. If this is so great to walk around with your body, why aren't men walking around with their penises hanging out, their testicles drooping between their legs? Why is it always us who has to expose our body? No, in a porn culture, if we do this argument that we show our breasts, or we just, what do you think men are going to think? Oh, there goes a radical feminist who's really fighting patriarchy. No, they're going to think there's some slut who wants to be fucked. So it makes no sense to me. The way we do this is we organize, we fight, we do collective action, we insist that governments regulate the industry. We go back to good old organizing, not showing our breasts. I'm sorry, that's never been a feminist tactic that most of us have signed on to in radical feminism.
Alors ensuite, que pensez-vous de l'éducation à la sexualité dans les pays comme la Suède ou l'Islande? What do you think of sexual education in countries like Sweden or Iceland?
Okay, so it's very interesting you say this because this is really an important issue. What we know is that most sex ed, especially in the United States and in England and in many countries, is terrible. The students hate it. It doesn't speak to their lives. So what we've done at Culture Reframed is that we are holding a conference, and I can give you the dates so that people can put this in their book, an international conference. It's going to be by Zoom. So just let me tell you when it is. It is going to be October. I'm just checking I've got the right timing. Just bear with me one moment when I look at 2021 is, okay, it's going to be October the 2nd and 3rd, and it will be advertising it. I'll let your group know, and it's going to be on how to teach sex ed in a pornified society. And we're going to be talking about how you teach sex ed to kids with a porn critical lens, because what happens today in sex ed is that they assume that you teach sex ed, but they don't assume kids have been viewing pornography. It's like sex ed from the 1990s. You cannot teach sex ed to kids who have already had their sexual template defined by pornography, which is by the age of 14, 15, most boys and a number of girls. So we have brought together a number of major sex ed experts along with us, and we are developing curriculum for sex ed teachers on how to teach in the high school sex ed with a porn critical lens. And again, the conference is going to be October the 2nd and 3rd, and we will be advertising it. So put that in your schedule, and it's going to be the first ever international conference that is a feminist conference on how to teach sex ed in a porn culture.
Ok, donc ce sera le 3 octobre, la conférence pour comment faire de l'éducation sexuelle dans un monde pornographié. Alors, on va passer à la prochaine question. Donc, est-ce que vous pensez que les femmes en situation de prostitution, et ça marche aussi donc pour la pornographie puisque c'est de la prostitution filmée, ne seraient pas les premiers individus qui auraient un préjudice si le système, disparaissait? Don't you think that prostituted women, and same with women in pornography, will be the first individuals to be prejudiced if the system vanishes?
Will be the first to.
Will be the first prejudiced
Oh,
individuals
you mean the
if the
first
system.
ones to be discriminated?
Yeah.
No, it is absolutely crucial that as we tear down these systems of exploitation, that we develop systems whereby we provide job support, home, not shelters, but proper homes, all the psychological support they need from getting out of this system, and that they have a living wage and they live with dignity and not poor. No, it has to be all part of a package, because I understand that these women in the industry are there for money because they can't survive, right, financially. So it has to come in a package with that, absolutely.
Et notamment dans le système abolitionniste, c'est ce qui est promu, pour qu'il y ait un accompagnement social des personnes, qui veulent sortir du système prostitutionnel, évidemment, parce que sinon effectivement on ne règle, absolument pas le problème, étant donné que la précarité est une énorme, partie, du problème évidemment. Il y a beaucoup de questions sur la régulation. Elle en a parlé dans sa présentation, donc je vais simplement, revenir dessus. Ce qu'elle propose, c'est qu'on fasse, plusieurs formes de régulation. Donc déjà qu'on mette en place une, régulation effective du fait que les enfants ne puissent pas avoir accès à la pornographie, notamment par le système de carte bancaire. C'est ce qui est mis en place pour, les paris sportifs, par exemple. Donc on demande que ça soit mis en place, pour la pornographie. Également, que la loi sur le viol ou le proxénétisme soit appliquée, ce qui empêcherait, un nombre de proxénètes, pornographes, d'exister également. Et donc elle propose qu'on applique une stratégie qu'elle appelle la Gulliver stratégie, donc c'est-à-dire de multiplier les réglementations pour que, ça soit beaucoup plus compliqué de mettre en place de la pornographie et donc de diffuser les viols, de femmes et d'enfants. Et en rebondissant sur cette, question, il y a une question qui est donc on a parlé de la régulation des sites, mais comment on peut faire pour les réseaux sociaux comme TikTok, par exemple? So we talked about regulation, sorry, of the porn websites, but how can we regulate social media like TikTok, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that has to be my last question, I'm afraid, because I've got another presentation at 3:00 my time. This is crucial, and this is where we need to start bringing in lawyers who are technologically savvy, because we know that a lot of kids are getting their porn through Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. We also know that the porn industry has cannibalized these social media sites to get to kids. So, I mean, we don't have lawyers who understand pornography, understand technology. We've got to find these people, educate them as to what's going on, and then develop laws that regulate all of those as well. It can be done. It can be done. I mean, people think because we now live in the age of the internet that we can't regulate. We absolutely can. We regulate. Well, look at what happened with WikiLeaks. They took that down within a few hours. When they want to regulate, they know exactly how to regulate. So it's absolutely crucial that we develop a body of knowledge of how to do this legally, how to make sure that when you regulate the porn industry, it's the porn industry you're regulating and not other things that shouldn't be regulated, like feminist sites and women's health sites and all of those things. So there's ways to do this, and there are a lot of people working on this now at the moment, but it's in its infancy and we've got to become more savvy. But you know what? Nothing will happen again, as I say, unless we as feminists make this happen. It is our job to force governments to do this. This is how women didn't get the vote, but they had to give women the vote because they couldn't stand to live with what women were doing to them without the vote. So we absolutely need to get back into activism again. And so that's it. So I'm going to have to say thank you so much for this and giving me the opportunity. I hope, can people turn their cameras on so I can just have a quick look at everybody?
Elle demande d'activer vos caméras.
I can just see people. You see so many wonderful women I'm looking at. I can see you. I'm just going through this. So I hope this was useful to you all and you gained some knowledge. I've not left you all too depressed. because we can do this, you know, we can do this. We've done it before and we can do it now. And that's our job. That's women's job, making the world a better place and cleaning up messes. So thank you all so much and have a good evening in France. And I'm sure we'll maybe do more seminars together.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vous avez le lien du livre de Gail Dines dans le chat. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
We're in for the letter to the Canadian government. We're definitely in, of course.
Okay, but I need people to help me because I'm working all the time. So email me at my website, through my website. Okay. Sure. Good night, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Bye, Gail. Merci à toutes. Et donc, je vous remets dans le chat également le lien pour adhérer au LEF ou faire des dons. On était ravis d'accueillir Gail Dines ce soir. Et merci à toutes d'avoir participé.
Merci beaucoup pour l'organisation, c'était super.
Merci.
Merci Ursula. Thank you so much, Dr.